The Treasury Secretary just stood in front of a national television audience and said the words every American investor has been waiting a decade to hear. We have the gold, all of it, present, accounted for, sitting inside Fort Knox. But in that same breath, he unveiled something else, a brand new coin bearing the president's face, stamped with the word gold. And yet, quietly, almost as an afterthought, the Treasury admitted something that should stop every investor in their tracks. There is no gold in it, none. So why call it gold at all? And why now, in this exact economic moment? What is really being signaled to the markets, to foreign governments, to the dollar itself? Stay with this story until the end, because what happens in the next few months to America's gold reserves may quietly reshape the value of everything you currently hold. Welcome back to Precious Metals Intelligence, the channel built for those who prefer to understand the system before the system explains itself to you. If you are joining for the first time, welcome. This channel exists for professionals, business owners, and lifelong savers who have learned, often the hard way, that the biggest financial risks rarely announce themselves loudly. They arrive quietly, dressed as good news. It happened during a live television interview, and within minutes, it was already spreading across financial news channels. The Treasury Secretary of the United States sat across from a well-known news host and said something that many investors had been waiting years to hear. He confirmed that all of America's gold, every single ton stored at Fort Knox, was present and accounted for. He gave the exact number, 8,133 tons. At today's market prices, he said, that gold is worth more than $1 trillion. He did not stop there. He added that the United States holds the largest pile of gold of any nation on earth, and that more gold was being added through dealings with Venezuela. For a moment, it sounded like good news, a confident government official speaking plainly, telling the public that the nation's most valuable reserve was safe and untouched. But for those who study financial history closely, this kind of statement raises more questions than it answers. Governments do not usually make public declarations about gold reserves without a reason. Reassurance is rarely offered unless someone, somewhere, has started to doubt. And in this case, the doubt has existed for a long time. For decades, everyday citizens, independent researchers, and even members of Congress have asked the same basic question. Can anyone actually prove that the gold is still there? This is where the story becomes more serious. The Treasury Secretary's statement was not backed by a new, independent inspection. It was not the result of a public audit conducted by outside experts. It was simply a verbal confirmation, given during a friendly interview, repeated by news outlets and accepted by many viewers without question. To understand why this matters, it helps to look at the bigger picture. The United States currently carries a national debt that continues to grow year after year. The interest payments alone, just the cost of borrowing, are enormous. In fact, the value of America's entire gold reserve, more than $1 trillion, would only be enough to cover a single year of interest payments on the national debt, not the debt itself, just the interest. This detail changes the meaning of the announcement entirely. It is no longer simply a story about gold sitting safely in a vault. It becomes a story about trust, timing, and the health of the entire financial system. When a government chooses this exact moment to publicly reassure its citizens about gold, serious observers begin to ask a different question. Why now? There are a few possible explanations. Confidence in the US dollar has been a subject of global conversation for years, as other nations quietly increase their own gold reserves and reduce their reliance on American currency. Public statements like this one may be designed to calm those fears, both at home and abroad. They may also be intended to support confidence in the dollar at a time when confidence is harder to maintain. Whatever the intention, the effect is the same. Millions of people heard a simple, comforting message. The gold is there, everything is fine. But comforting words are not proof, and history has shown again and again that financial reassurance delivered without transparency should be examined carefully, not simply accepted. This is not a claim that anything dishonest has taken place. It is instead a reminder that responsible investors and business professionals do not build decisions on trust alone. They ask for evidence. They look at timing. They consider what is being said, but also what is being left out. The Treasury Secretary's confirmation was strong, direct, and confident. But confidence is not the same as verification. And in a moment where the national debt continues to climb, where interest payments alone could consume the entire value of the nation's gold reserve, that difference becomes extremely important. What happened next made the situation even more complicated. In that very same interview, before the segment ended, the Treasury Secretary revealed something else entirely. He introduced the public to a brand new coin, one that would soon carry the president's own image, and one that many people would immediately assume was made of real gold. Something small happened during that same interview, something most viewers likely missed entirely. Buried between the confident claims about gold, the Treasury Secretary made a mistake and then quietly corrected himself. He had mentioned, almost in passing, that Fort Knox held both gold and silver. It was a natural assumption for many people to make, since the two metals are often mentioned together in conversations about America's financial history. But this claim was not accurate, and he corrected it moments later. There is no silver stored at Fort Knox. There never has been, at least not as an official reserve asset. The only silver the United States government holds is kept separately at the Mint facility in West Point, and it exists for a single purpose. It is used to produce silver coins sold to collectors and investors, not to back the nation's currency or financial system. This correction may seem like a minor detail, but for those paying close attention, it revealed something important. If a senior government official can misspeak about something as basic as what metals the country actually holds, how much confidence should the public place in verbal assurances about the country's most sensitive financial reserves? This question leads directly to a much bigger and more troubling issue, one that has quietly followed America's gold reserves for more than 70 years. There has not been a complete, independent, and fully transparent audit of the gold held at Fort Knox since 1953. That is not a typing error. 7 decades have passed since the last full inspection took place. Since then, the government has conducted what it calls annual audits, but these are not the kind of audits that business professionals or financial experts would consider trustworthy. These yearly reviews are largely procedural. They are described by many analysts as boilerplate documents, meaning the paperwork looks similar year after year, often using the same figures, without any real physical inspection by outside independent parties. No respected international auditing firm has been given full access to verify, weigh, and test the gold bars said to be stored inside that vault. This absence of real verification becomes even more significant when placed next to another detail. Donald Trump himself, before becoming president again, publicly suggested that a full and proper audit should take place. He raised the idea more than once, yet once he returned to office, that call for an audit quietly faded into the background. No formal audit was launched. No independent inspection was announced. Why would a sitting president, who once questioned the state of the gold reserves, choose not to pursue an audit once he had the power to order one? There could be several possible explanations, and reasonable people may disagree on which is most likely. It is possible that Trump was reassured privately that everything is exactly as claimed, and simply decided the audit was unnecessary. It is possible that Treasury officials advised him that launching a public audit could create panic or raise more questions than it answers. It is also possible that logistical, legal, or political complications made the idea more difficult than expected. Whatever the reason, the outcome remains the same. The American public is once again being asked to accept, on faith, that trillions of dollars in national wealth are sitting safely, untouched, exactly where officials claim it to be. For business professionals and serious investors, this is not simply a curiosity, it is a pattern worth watching closely. Financial systems built on verified transparency tend to remain stable over long periods of time. Financial systems that rely primarily on public trust and verbal reassurance become vulnerable the moment that trust is questioned. And trust, once shaken, is notoriously difficult to rebuild, especially in matters involving national wealth, currency confidence, and government credibility. This growing gap between reassurance and verification sets the stage for what came next in that very same interview. Because immediately after discussing gold reserves and audits, the Treasury Secretary shifted the conversation towards something entirely different. A brand new coin carrying the image of the president himself was about to be introduced to the American public. And the choice of language used to describe that coin would soon spark its own wave of confusion, controversy, and closer examination. Just as the conversation about audits and missing verification began to settle, the Treasury Secretary shifted the subject entirely. He leaned forward and introduced something new to the American public, a coin unlike any that had been issued in generations. This was not simply another collector's item added to a long list of commemorative currency. This coin was designed to mark the 250th anniversary of the United States, and it would carry something extremely rare, the face of a sitting, living president. For most of American history, this has not been allowed. Federal law generally prohibits placing the image of a living person on official currency. There have been very few exceptions throughout the nation's entire history. One notable case involved a coin issued to honor the 150th anniversary of the country, which featured a sitting president at that time. Beyond that, examples are almost impossible to find. This alone made the announcement historically significant. But it was the second detail that truly caught public attention and eventually public confusion. The coin was being referred to, casually and repeatedly, as a gold coin. News headlines picked up the phrase almost immediately. Social media users shared images of it online, many assuming, quite reasonably, that a coin tied to America's gold reserves, announced during a conversation about gold reserves, must actually contain gold. It does not. The Treasury itself confirmed this directly. Despite its appearance, despite the branding, despite the timing of the announcement, this new coin contains no gold whatsoever, not a single gram. Its actual composition is identical to the standard dollar coins that the United States Mint produces every single year for regular circulation. The correct technical term for this type of coin is a golden dollar, a phrase used for decades to describe coins that simply have a gold-like color, achieved through a specific blend of metals without any actual gold content. It is a naming convention that has existed in American coinage for a long time, but one that most ordinary citizens are simply unaware of. This is where the story becomes especially important for anyone paying close attention to timing and messaging. In the very same public appearance where the Treasury Secretary reassured Americans that the nation's actual gold reserves were fully intact, he also introduced a coin that borrows the language, symbolism, and visual identity of gold without containing any of it. Some analysts view this as simple coincidence, a natural part of a broader celebration surrounding the nation's 250th anniversary. Others see something more deliberate, a carefully timed exercise in psychological reassurance, where the word gold is repeated often enough, in enough different contexts, that public confidence in the currency itself becomes reinforced, regardless of whether real gold is involved. This coin will not be intended for everyday circulation. According to Treasury statements, it will be produced at the Philadelphia Mint and made available to the public later in the year, sold primarily in official rolls and bags rather than distributed through banks or general commerce. In practice, this means most Americans will never actually hold one in daily use. It exists primarily as a symbolic and collectible item. Yet symbolism carries real weight, especially in matters of national currency. Throughout history, governments have used coins, metals, and commemorative currency to shape public perception during periods of economic uncertainty. A coin bearing a president's image, tied to gold in name only, released during a moment when questions about actual gold reserves remain unanswered, is not simply a piece of collectible metal. It is a message. For business professionals and long-term investors, the lesson here extends beyond the coin itself. It is a reminder that language matters greatly in financial communication. The word gold carries enormous psychological weight, evoking safety, permanence, and value. When that word is used loosely, even in celebratory or patriotic contexts, it can quietly shape public perception in ways that have nothing to do with actual economic substance. This raises an important question that deserves closer examination. If official government communication is willing to use the word gold so freely, even when no gold is present, how carefully should the public examine other financial claims made during the same period? That question becomes even more pressing when placed next to the coin's actual design, the symbolism chosen for both sides of the coin, and the timing of its release relative to broader economic pressures facing the nation. When these two announcements are placed side by side, a clearer picture begins to form. On one hand, the nation's top financial official told the public that America's gold reserves remained fully intact. On the other hand, that same official introduced a coin that borrows the language of gold without containing any of it. Taken separately, each event might seem unremarkable. Taken together, they suggest something worth examining more closely. Timing matters greatly in financial communication. Governments rarely make major statements about currency, reserves, or national wealth without careful thought behind the timing. When reassurance about gold and a gold-themed coin arrive, within the same conversation, on the same day, it becomes reasonable to ask whether this was simply convenient scheduling or something more intentional. The design of the coin itself adds another layer to this discussion. On one side, the president's image appears, drawn from a photograph many viewers immediately recognized. On the other side, the coin uses a familiar design, the Great Seal of the United States, similar to imagery already used on other American coins for many years. Nothing about the physical design is unusual on its own. What stands out is the broader framing around it, tied closely to patriotism, national pride, and the celebration of 250 years of independence. This kind of framing is not accidental. Patriotic symbolism tends to generate strong emotional responses, often stronger than careful financial analysis. When a coin is wrapped in national pride and released during a moment of economic uncertainty, it can create a feeling of stability and strength, even if the underlying financial situation remains unchanged. This matters because public psychology plays a real role in how people view their own money. When citizens feel confident about their currency, they spend, save, and invest differently than when they feel uncertain. Governments understand this relationship well, and public messaging, including something as simple as a coin, can influence that sense of confidence, even without changing any actual economic conditions. At the same time, the deeper financial pressures facing the country have not gone away. The national debt continues to grow year after year, and the interest payments required to service that debt continue to rise alongside it. As mentioned earlier, the entire value of America's gold reserves, more than $1 trillion, would only be enough to cover a single year of interest payments on the national debt, not the debt itself, just the interest owed for 12 months. This comparison puts the situation into perspective. Gold reserves, no matter how large they appear on paper, represent a very small piece of a much larger financial puzzle. When public officials repeatedly emphasize the size and safety of these reserves, while broader debt figures continue climbing largely unmentioned, it creates an uneven picture. One part of the story receives constant attention and reassurance. The other part receives comparatively little public discussion. For business professionals and serious investors, this pattern deserves attention, not panic. It is not evidence of dishonesty or wrongdoing. It is, however, a clear example of how financial narratives can be shaped through timing, symbolism, and selective emphasis. Understanding this pattern allows individuals to look past the surface of official announcements and focus on the underlying numbers that truly matter: debt levels, interest obligations, currency stability, and long-term economic trends. The gold reassurance, the coin announcement, and the broader economic backdrop are not separate, unrelated events. They form a single, connected narrative, one designed, whether intentionally or not, to shape how the public feels about the strength of the nation's finances during a period when actual verification remains limited and national debt continues to climb without clear resolution. What this pattern means for individual investors, business owners, and everyday savers preparing for the years ahead is where this story turns next.